Earlier this week, hypersonic missiles landed in Ukraine, at least 6 of them, and we all know who fired those missiles, Russia. These missiles are called kinzhals, or daggers. They can travel extremely fast, and by extremely fast, I mean 10 times the speed of sound. That's why they're called hypersonic. These weapons are normally carried by MiG-31K fighters, and they can hit targets as far as 1,250 miles. Also, these missiles are hard to track using on-ground radar. So clearly, these are the most sophisticated missiles that Russia has got. Here's what's also very important. Kinzhals can carry nuclear warheads. In short, these missiles are no joke. And the fact that Russia chose to fire 6 of these missiles into Ukraine cannot be taken lightly. The hypersonic missiles landed in Ukraine with a clear message. And what's that message? But that depends on whom you ask. Some analysts believe that Russia resorting to new age weapons reeks of desperation. The other school of thought is the hypersonic missiles are Russia's way of terrorizing the common Ukrainian man and woman and also telling the West, we are not going to give up easily. Let's turn to the first point though. What is it that's making Russia so desperate? Bakhmut, this city. It's located close to Donetsk and Luhansk, and Russia has been trying to control it for 7 months. 7 months, as I've been telling you, that's how long the battle for Bakhmut has been ongoing. 7 months on, there's a stalemate. In fact, this entire situation is starting to look like World War I, not like a more modern-day war. Trench warfare, entrenched warfare, neither side not moving too fast. Why does Russia want Bakhmut? Well, before the war, just about 70,000 people lived in this city. Today, most of them have left. Those who've stayed behind live in underground bomb shelters. This city was known for its salt and gypsum mines. It also had huge wineries. Today, of course, Bakhmut is a ghost town. It's of little economic value. And yet, Russia's putting all hands on deck to win Bakhmut. Some 20 to 30,000 Russian soldiers are already believed to have died or have been injured in the bloody battle for Bakhmut. So we are back to the question, what is it about Bakhmut that Russia is so desperate about? Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has an answer. Here's what he told an American media outlet earlier this week, and I'm quoting, "We understand that after Bakhmut, they could go further. They could go to Kramatorsk. They could go to Sloviansk. This would then open the door for the Russians after Bakhmut to other towns in Ukraine in the Donetsk direction." In short, Ukraine believes that if Bakhmut falls, it opens the gate. Towns and cities nearby will also fall. Now that's what Ukraine is saying. The problem here is that not all analysts agree. Some believe that the fight for Bakhmut is more symbolic than strategic. One, Russia is desperate for a victory because it's been quite some time since Russia actually won Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, and some of those are the last sizable victories that Russia had, and that was some time back. Now, Bakhmut is Russia's best bet for another victory. Why? Because the fight here has been ongoing for long enough. Russia hopes that Ukrainian troops may somehow just drop the ball now. Kiev says that's not happening. It's going to go on fighting in Bakhmut as long as it can. I guess the key question is also the losses that the Ukrainian side is taking. How many Ukrainian troops have died in Bakhmut? Well, NATO says only 1 Ukrainian is dying for every 5 Russian, but that is NATO, and you can't necessarily expect it to be objective in this war. Now, there is, of course, a third player involved in the fight for Bakhmut, Russia's private army, the Wagner group. And this is important. Currently, this is at the heart of the battle for Bakhmut. Now, the group's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, wants to make a point by winning Bakhmut, and that's to show Russia that the Wagner group can win a battle that the Russian army can't. Basically, Prigozhin wants to show Moscow that his fighters are better than the regular Russian troops. And there's a backstory here as well. You see, this man, Prigozhin, is close to Vladimir Putin, but he does not get along so well with Russia's defense minister, Sergei Shoigu. In fact, Prigozhin is often heard criticizing Shoigu's tactics, and Bakhmut is Prigozhin's chance to settle his score with the defense minister. Guess what? he doesn't seem to be too far behind. Earlier this week, the Wagner group claimed control of eastern Ukraine. Prigozhin wasted no time in making this announcement.
Wagner group regiments have taken the whole of eastern Bakhmut. Everything east of the Bakhmutka river is fully controlled by Wagner group. This can be reported.
Now, Ukraine didn't confirm this, but something that the NATO chief Jens Stoltenberg said earlier this week did not really infuse too much confidence.
We can not rule out that Bakhmut may eventually fall in the coming days.
What happens if Bakhmut falls? Zelensky has given you the answer to this question. But the fact of the matter is, Bakhmut has not yet fallen. It's still very much a part of Ukraine, and there is a stalemate. Is that what is making Russia desperate? It has to win Bakhmut, because if it can't win Bakhmut after everything it has done, then where does the war go from a Russian point of view? Is that the reason behind the barrage of hypersonic missiles landing in Ukraine? Also, where does the war go from here? Well, let me throw that question to Dmytro Zarutykin, who's the former Deputy Minister of Information Policy in Ukraine. He's joining us now from Kiev. Thank you so much, Mr. Zarutykin, for joining us. Just give us the perspective on how the war is going at the present moment, according to you.
Thank you for having me. Well, Ukrainians keep suffering from the massive missile attacks on the civil infrastructure all over the country, from east to west, from south to north. Almost every region is being hit by the Russian missiles, and the awful part that we don't understand, and no one understands what they want to achieve by shelling all the cities, and especially the energy objects. When it was like November and December, so it was rather understandable. So they wanted to switch off the energy for all the civil inhabitants of Ukraine, and to make them protest against Ukrainian government, that Ukrainian government is not delivering the heating or energy or lights to the citizens. So now it is already warm in Ukraine. It is spring, so it doesn't matter whether you heat the energy structures or not, because nothing will happen. So the awful part that this is absolutely insane, because it doesn't make any effect neither to Russian army nor to Ukrainian citizens. So it's just a terror. It's just a terror against civil infrastructure and energy infrastructure.
Right.
As for the front lines, yeah, everything is very tough, but controlled by Ukrainian army. And yes, in the spring we expect some changes on the front line, because of the Western arms are to come to Ukraine, and the diplomatic field, of course, is also struggling for the air jets, also as a part of the Western support in military domain.
If I could just ask you about the missiles first. Russia has fired hypersonic missiles into Ukraine. As far as I know, I think that's the first time those missiles have actually been used in a war or a warlike situation. What is your understanding of that? Why do you think these new age weapons are being used? Is it shock and awe? Is it to terrorize Ukrainians and to say we're going to bring more advanced weaponry into play here?
I have to say I'm not a kind of military expert, and I don't think that Russia has too many hypersonic missiles. So this is a quite costly instrument, and they have already go below the line, the limit they have to save for themselves. So instead of they saying that they are fighting against NATO, but NATO is not yet come to the front line. So there is no NATO that they are fighting against. But in the same time, they have a minimum of their hypersonic missiles now, because they spent everything on Ukraine. More than this, we have Belgorod, which is a Russian city just near Ukrainian border on the north. So if some simple missiles like S-300, excuse me, so if they are shooting against Kharkov is a Ukrainian 1 million city in the east of the country. So if they shoot in Kharkiv, so it is only takes 50 seconds for the missile from S-300 to reach Kharkiv, to reach center of Kharkiv from Belgorod. So they do not have to use hypersonic missiles to kill people and to shell the energy infrastructure, because they are just standing along the border and they're using very ordinary missile weapons. And the problem is that Ukraine is not responding. So Ukraine has its own strategy to liberate and to free its own territory, to reach the territorial integrity. So Ukraine is not shooting against civil inhabitants of the Russian cities. So we even cannot respond, eliminating the missile systems that are located in a city like Belgorod, which is on the Russian territory.
Right. If you can just share with us, and you were talking about the front line a short while back, it all seems to be boiling down to a fairly big battle over Bakhmut. It's been raging for a long period of time. The Russians are feeling that they could potentially capture it. Yet the Russians are taking heavy losses, but so is Ukraine. Ukraine is also losing a lot of soldiers there.
Absolutely. We're also suffering a lot with the losses. Of course, this number is not disclosing, but we all understand the cost that is being paid for our freedom and for our independence. On the other side, I have to say that in March 2022 and in February 2022, the Western intelligence services, they gave us only 72 hours to stand against the Russian full-scale invasion. So now it is already, 369 days. Instead of 72 hours, we are standing. So now the Secretary General of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, he said that it is highly possible that Ukraine will lose the city of Bakhmut on the east of the country. Well, I have to say that Western analysis around Ukraine, it was a big false previously, and I think we have highly probability that it's going to be again the false analysis of what Ukraine capable for now. But of course, the situation is very dangerous still, because not only because of the Russian army, but because of the so-called Wagner group that is being filled with former jailed people, drug dealers, rapers, killers, murderers, and so on and so forth. So they were picked out from jails by Mr. Yevgeny Prigozhin, who is close to Vladimir Putin. And now all these people, they are being like expendables on the front. So, of course, where we losing our best people, Ukrainian soldiers, Ukrainian warriors, they are just losing these people who are somewhere out of the Russian society. They were jailed. They had to stay in jail for another 20 years. And now they are being taken from jails and sent to the front. So this is the very disappointing part, because we are losing best people. They are losing people from the jails.
So that's one of the questions when you're looking at the path ahead, and frankly the entire world's looking at the situation. You're absolutely correct. Ukraine has lasted more than a year, and many people have felt it was going to be 2 or 3 days. But it's not very clear how this war is going to come to an end. Do you think a military victory for Ukraine is at all possible? Or at some point will there have to be a negotiated settlement and a search for a negotiated settlement? Otherwise, this could continue for a long period of time.
To make it very straight, I don't think that Vladimir Putin is ready to propose something for negotiations. Now what he's saying, he's proposing Ukraine to accept all these territory losses, but we are not talking about territory losses. We all have seen the nightmares and atrocities in Bucha, in Kherson, in other cities captured by Russian army after the full-scale invasion. And we are talking about people staying on the occupied territories, occupied by Russian army territories. They are being tortured, raped, and killed. So unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, I don't know, for these people, of course, fortunately, Ukraine will never give them up. Ukraine will never agree to sacrifice all those people that are living on the occupied territories, because human rights This is the priority value that we prevail as a part of our vision. So unfortunately, Vladimir Putin has nothing to propose for Ukraine on these negotiations, and instead of trying to reach certain agreements, they're trying to press Vladimir Zelensky and Ukrainian government to go for these compromises. So it will never happen. We just don't have any other way but to win this war by getting our territorial integrity back, by reaching the control of our borders internationally recognized in 1991. And I think we are totally capable to do this with the Western support, because Russia has already lost this war. However, like my fellow colleagues and experts say, Russia has lost this war, but unfortunately Ukraine has not won this war yet, because unfortunately the world and the Western world and other countries and G20 people are not ready yet for Russia and Kremlin to be defeated, because we don't understand how the country like Russia, with these crazy atrocities and nuclear weapons, will look like after the defeat. When we will make all the people on the planet ready for Russian defeat, Ukraine will win the same day.
Of course, you do require Western help and Western arms and Western support to be able to do that. I mean, Ukraine by itself would find it difficult to do it without everyone doing it. But your position is clear. You're saying there can be no compromise. Luhansk, Donetsk, Crimea, all of them have to be part of Ukraine, and it has to end with a Russian defeat. Otherwise, it won't be acceptable to Ukraine. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Zolotykin, for joining us with that perspective from Kiev. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for more on all of that, we're now being joined by Fred Weyer, who's a journalist and a political commentator who's in Moscow right now, just on the outskirts of Moscow. Mr. Weyer, thank you so much for joining us. Just help us understand what exactly is the Russian perspective on where this war is right now, and in particular, the focus on Bakhmut is becoming really important for Russia, it seems.
Well, the war has had several iterations. It just seems that the Russian strategy has been changing. Perhaps their appetite is diminished, but they are definitely intent on winning and taking at least the eastern parts of Ukraine, the Donbass, Zaporozhye, Kherson region, that they have already annexed. And these are areas where, Russians have been fighting and generally winning for 300 years. I mean, they've fought in this region. They've fought Poles and Turks and Swedes and French and Germans. They fought a civil war over this territory. This is the historical perspective, I think, that a lot of people don't understand, that informs the Russian mind and why they're fighting and why they'll continue to fight. But it's a matter of raising social resources and economic and military potential to actually win, because I don't think the Russians expected that Ukraine would have support pretty much of the United West. They didn't expect the Ukrainians to fight quite as hard and determinedly as they are. So Russia has been slow to mobilize men, very slow to get its economy on a war footing, but this is all happening now. And the battle around Bakhmut, it's like Stalingrad. It is a horrific battle of attrition. It just is absorbing men and resources on both sides. And the Russians, of course, need to take Bakhmut if they're going to keep moving westward. They're in the Donbass. And the Ukrainians similarly think that Bakhmut will be, if they lose there, then the rest of the dominoes will collapse in the east for them. I think Zelensky said something pretty much like that the other day.
Yes,
so
we
therefore,
just played a little bit out of it. So you're saying Bakhmut is almost being viewed as a Stalingrad sort of a situation. It holds the key. Ukrainians feel that if Bakhmut falls, then there'll be a domino effect, swooping to the west. But does Russia have the capability, even if it wins Bakhmut, to really advance very fast? Because if you look at the last 7-8 months, it's been a bit of a stalemate. It's not that the Russians are really having the ability to advance very fast. Bakhmut or no Bakhmut?
Yes, I think as I said, the Russians started the war with a completely different strategy and not enough forces. They had like 200,000 men altogether when they went in a year ago. They have gone through one mobilization now and added 300,000, although you probably have to subtract a lot of losses from that. But still, they have not got the forces that they need to actually win the war. Ukraine is now on its 6th mobilization, and they're like pretty much maxed out on manpower. So I think the perspective in Moscow is that mathematics will prevail. Russia will probably have another mobilization in the spring. Their war industries, which are the former Soviet military-industrial complex, are just getting geared up. I think that the Russians are, people I talk to, people I know, even those who are really critical of the war, think that in the long run, the sheer weight of Russia with 4 times the population, a working industrial economy, is going to defeat Ukraine.
Mathematics is one thing. Mathematics is one thing. I mean, let's not forget, in the past, countries like Israel defeated the united combined forces of the Arab countries, which were, not 4 times more, but 10 times more. So that can happen. We just heard, the former one of the ministers for information from Ukraine talking to us and saying people thought that Ukraine would last 72 hours. It's been a year. Do not underestimate our fighting capability. There are 30, 40 million people in Ukraine. It's not that it's an insignificantly small country. So are the Russians also continuing to underestimate Ukrainian resilience and resolve?
I think you're absolutely right that nobody expected that. And Ukraine has got a national spirit. They clearly are fighting brilliantly. And they've taken advantage of Russian blunders, mistakes, bad, still incoherent strategy. But I don't think that the Russians underestimate the Ukrainians anymore. At least I do know a couple of Russian war correspondents who are down there all the time. They are the main news gatherers for the Russian media. And they express nothing but admiration for the fighting capabilities of the Ukrainian soldiers. So I guess that's true. And wars are inherently unpredictable. But one of the things that has become clear is that although Ukraine is supported and supplied by the West, Western technology is not vastly superior to Russian technology. The level of Ukrainian training isn't really better than the Russian training. I mean, if you look at the Middle East wars, Israel defeating all those Arab countries, it's because Israel was a modern industrial country with highly educated, capable population, and they were all kind of peasant societies. This is different. These two are equally matched in many respects, and yet Russia does enjoy these vast numerical advantages.
Right. One last question. The fact that Russia is now using new age, the most advanced weaponry that it's got, like hypersonic missiles, which it's been firing into Ukraine. What does that signal? Is it desperation, or is it a signal that Russia is about to increase up the ante further?
Well, one thing you can say after years, they're definitely not running out of ammunition, because we've heard that over and over again. In fact, they probably have like shortages of ammunition, and what I hear, because this is all top secret information, but the Russian war industries are running on 3 shifts a day. They're working and supplying at least most of what the Russian army will need. And we know from various independent studies that some of the missiles hitting in Ukraine have been, like when their pieces are analyzed, they've been built recently. So they're not running down stockpiles alone. They are replenishing. And that must be jarring news in the West and in Ukraine.
All right, Mr. Vaid, thank you so much for joining us. So clearly doesn't look as if there's going to be an immediate solution on the battlefield. Let's see what happens in Bakhmut. I guess Bakhmut may well hold the key in many, many ways. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
Thank you.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.